This is the Late Round Podcast with your host, JJ Zacharisa.
What's up, everyone? It's JJ Zacharisa, the editor-in-chief at FanDuel and at NumberFire.com, and this is episode 412 of the Late Round Podcast, one of the many shows that are part of the FanDuel Podcast Network. Thanks for tuning in. The 2020 NFL season has officially started, and despite being just 1 week into the season, FanDuel has already made somebody a millionaire, and they plan on doing it all over again this week. For just $4, you can enter the Week 2 NFL Sunday Million and compete for your share of the $3 million prize pool, including a $1 million first place prize. With 13 games on the slate, there's no shortage of big-name fantasy players to build your lineups around. For more details, visit FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel app today. Eligibility restrictions apply. Trend 1 this week is about the Steelers, and in particular, the Steelers' wide receivers. Juju Smith-Schuster had a nice top 10 performance on Monday night after scoring 2 times. And James Washington found the end zone too. Deontay Johnson was horrific in the first half of that game. But he actually came through in the second half, and he led the Steelers in targets. Johnson had a 32% target share. Juju was about 19%, and James Washington at 10%. If you look at how social media is talking about the wide receiver group in Pittsburgh, people are ready to bail on Deontay Johnson. But the peripherals are there. He should be fine moving forward. Trend 2 is that no team targeted the running back position at a lower rate than the Chargers in Week 1. Now, I talked a lot about Austin Eckler and Josh Kelly on yesterday's 15 Transaction show, but it's still pretty wild that the Chargers running backs saw just 3.5% of the team's targets against Cincinnati. I'm not bullish that this goes in the opposite direction and Eckler all of a sudden gets like a 15% target share either. On Monday, Anthony Lynn talked about how this new offensive scheme is likely to limit checkdowns to the running back position. He did say he wants to continue getting Eckler the ball, but my fear is that he means on the ground and not just through the air. This is all why things are trending down for Eckler right now. But like I said on yesterday's episode, the next 2 weeks are 2 of the best matchups that Eckler could possibly walk into. Philadelphia threw it at the highest rate in the league on Sunday with a pass rate of 76%. Carson Wentz also threw it 15 or more air yards on 29% of his attempts. That was a top 5 number in the league. The Eagles were very pass friendly. I was kind of surprised by the deep ball frequency when you consider their offensive line injuries going up against a Washington defensive line that's really, really good. But at this rate, volume is going to be there for their pass catchers. When the game was within 6 points on Sunday, so neutral game scripts, the Eagles had a 3.17 pass-to-rush ratio. That was by far the highest in the league. Now, maybe things change when Miles Sanders returns. And the Eagles didn't win, so maybe they'll force that change. But it was a pretty interesting development in Week 1. Kenyon Drake was out-targeted 5-2 by Chase Edmonds in Week 1. Now, is it time to panic with Kenyon Drake? I don't think panic is the right word. But Chase Edmonds is definitely looking like he's going to limit Kenyon Drake. We knew that would happen to some degree, but this could really limit the ceiling. I mean, consider this. When Drake moved to Arizona last year on a per-game basis, he had a 13.8% target share. He dipped below the 10% mark in just 1 game. On Sunday, his target share is 5.4%. The good news is Drake saw over 70% of the team's snaps, and he saw the team's only goal line rush. He'll still be fine in fantasy football this year, especially if Arizona's offense really clicks. Nick Chubb finished Week 1 seeing 41.7% of Cleveland's running back rushes. His single game low last year was 62.5%. Now, I sent this tweet out and I got some angry responses because there was an ultra negative game script in that game for Cleveland, which is why Chubb wasn't on the field. That and he fumbled. Now, I agree with this idea overall. A negative game script is going to favor Kareem Hunt more than it's going to favor Nick Chubb. And Chubb should be fine, absolutely fine in Week 2. But the issue with this particular trend is that, number 1, Chubb is even more game script dependent than we might have thought entering the season. And number 2, even in the first half of this past week's game, the rushing share split between Chubb and Hunt was 50-50. It's definitely not a positive trend for Nick Chubb. 2 running backs saw 100% of their team's running back rushes in Week 1. One was expected, Derrick Henry. The other one was James Robinson. Now, I'm really curious as to what Robinson's numbers are going to look like in a true negative game script, which I still expect to happen a lot for Jacksonville this year. But so far, so good for my dude, James Robinson. I doubt you could trade him for that much right now, so just go along for the ride. He was free after all. The 49ers had the highest target share to running backs at 45.6% in week 1. Meanwhile, something had to give in that offense to allow for that, and the 49ers had the second lowest wide receiver target share at 33.3%. Only Las Vegas was lower. This is really what the focus of the Raheem Mostert transaction was all about on yesterday's show. I think Mostert's going to be plenty fantasy relevant this year, but I highly doubt that we see him maintain his 15% target share throughout the season once we get players like Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel back. But Mostert probably will be pretty strong in the short term, especially with this new George Kittle injury. Only 2 players saw more than 80% of their team's running back rushes to go along with a 20% or better target share in week 1. One of them was Saquon Barkley, the other one, Josh Jacobs. Jacobs' target share on Sunday was actually over 5 percentage points higher than his previous career high. If Vegas keeps this up, Jacobs has a good chance to move up into firm RB1 status. It'll be interesting to see what happens in tougher matchups and negative game scripts, which they could face in the coming weeks because they do have a tough schedule. But I'm optimistic about Josh Jacobs. Trend 9 is that Tampa Bay was by far the run-heaviest team in neutral game script situations in week 1. Their pass-to-rush ratio in those situations was just 0.38. I'm not really understanding this game plan from Tampa Bay, considering New Orleans has a strong front. But I'd expect things to get better this week in arguably the softest matchup in the league when Tampa Bay faces Carolina. Now, the final trend of the week is that Adrian Peterson was either targeted or had a rush attempt on 70.8% of his snaps on Sunday. That was the highest utilization rate in the entire NFL. Now, even though Peterson was a thing in week 1, it wasn't all that bad for teammate and rookie DeAndre Swift. Swift still had a target share of 12.2%, and he still led that backfield in snaps played. Aside from that drop at the end of the game, things could have been a lot worse for DeAndre Swift in a crowded backfield. I don't think he's a buy candidate, though, because I do think that we'll see a committee this year, but I don't think that he's a sell either. He's one of those guys who you should be ready to pounce on if the peripheral numbers trend in the right direction. Because remember, league-winning running backs generally come from ambiguous backfields. That's going to do it for today's show. Thanks to all of you for listening. If you've yet to subscribe to the Late Round Podcast, make sure you are by searching for it pretty much anywhere podcasts can be found. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter @LateRoundQB. Thanks, everyone. I'll be back in your ear tomorrow with the weekly matchup show.